This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so speaking about unfortunate passings and deaths, that is our Parsha this week to a certain degree. Parshat Vayechi begins with the death of Yaakov, of Jacob, and it ends with the death of Yosef, of Joseph. But there's a lot that we can glean and understand along the way. So let's begin on page 268, and then we're going to do a little bit of jumping around. Okay, Vayichi Yaakov, 268, 269, Perek Mem Zayin, Pasuk Chavchet, the start of Parshat Vayichi. Vayichi Yaakov, the Eretz Mitzrayim. Yaakov lived in the land of Egypt, Shva Esrei Shana, 17 years. And I always like to point out the two parshiot which have the word chai, life, in it, which is Chaye Sarah, the life of Sarah, and Vayichi, this week's parsha. Both of them deal with death, with the passing, which perhaps hints to the idea that from a Jewish perspective, life does not end when the physical body dies. But then, as we've been learning in our Derech Hashem, all are welcome to join us 5:45 Monday nights about the different stages that we go through in life and afterlife, and the different stages of afterlife we've been dealing with. So the death is referred to as a Gesher HaChaim, the bridge of life between our physical existence and our spiritual existence. And we point out the Hebrew word for life is L'chaim, and Chaim is Chai in the plural, because we view life as having this plurality, having this duality, and therefore it is the physical death is not the end of life in any way. It's the end of physical life as we know it. So Vayichi Yaakov lived Eretz Mitzrayim in the land of Egypt 17 years. Right? As we know, Yosef revealed his identity to the brothers. Yaakov Avinu said, "Oh, Yosef, Chai, oh, Yosef, my son, oh, Yosef Beni, Yosef, my son, is still alive." And he came down to Egypt, and that's where he lived out the rest of his life, the remaining 17 years of his life. Altogether, the years of the life of Jacob, of Yaakov, were 147 years. When he's about to die, he summons Yosef, and he says to him, Pasuk Chavtet 29, Imna matzati chen beinecha, if I found favor in your eyes, Simna yadcha tachit yirechi, place your hand under my thigh, and take upon yourself to do with me chesed ve'emet, kindness and truth. And here's where we learn out that anything that we do with the deceased is called chesed shel emet. It's called true kindness of truth, because there is no reciprocity that a person is waiting for. And al na tikbareni b'Mitzrayim, do not bury me in Egypt. V'shachavti im avotai, I will rest with my fathers. I will lie down with my fathers. Now this is fascinating. We refer to death as lying down with my fathers. That's not yet burial. That's death, where the soul returns to those who have left the world prior to our leaving the world. And then you'll carry me from Egypt, and you will bury me bikvuratam, in their burial place. Yosef said, I'll do like you said. Yaakov said, that's not enough. Swear to me. And he swore, and Yisroel bowed down. Okay. Afterwards it was said to Yosef, your father is sick. And he brought his sons, Menashe and Ephraim, to Yaakov to receive the blessing, and he blessed them. Then we're going to jump ahead a little bit. When Yaakov, chapter 49, page 274, Yaakov understands that he is reaching the very, very end of his life, and he gathers all of his sons there for him to give a blessing to each of his sons. Blessing, Rose will discuss in more depth tonight during our conversion class, but blessing, Baruch, is actually a term of increase. So the brachot that he gave the boys was to take their latent kochot, abilities, qualities, and that they should grow, they should increase. That's the bracha that he gave to each of them. But I want to jump up to page 280, Perek Memtet Pasuk Chaf Bet, to the bracha that he gave to Yosef. And from here, let's see if we can glean the question that everyone asks. Did Yaakov ever find out what the brothers had done to Joseph? Did he ever find out the story of the sale? Did he ever know fully what happened or not? And as I had written in the newsletter, I believe it was last week's newsletter. Yeah, last week's newsletter. One of the commentators, the Or HaChaim, I believe, explains that the reason why Yosef did not contact his father earlier on was because he was afraid that then the father would find out what the brothers had done, and he would end up cursing the brothers and excluding them from Klal Yisrael in a way that Yishmael and Esav were excluded. So he didn't reach out to his father until he was sure that the brothers had done a complete teshuvah, which he saw clearly from Yehuda's advocating on behalf of Binyamin and being willing to stay in place of Benjamin as a slave to Joseph as punishment for the goblet having been stolen. And therefore, at that point, he was confident that even if father would find out, then it would be tempered by the relationship that they had now been able to establish. But the question remains, did Yaakov ever really find out what happened with the brothers and Joseph or not? So let's take a look at the blessing that Yaakov gives to Yosef. And that is Pasuk Chaf Bet, verse 22, page 280, 281, Memtet, chapter 49, verse 22. Ben Porat Yosef. Yosef, you are, Rashi says, Ben Chen, the English translates it accordingly, a son of charm, a charming son. Ben Porat Alei Ayin. A charming son, Alei Ayin. Whoever sees you, you find charm in their eyes. And certainly, wherever Yosef ended up, he rose to the top. He was in the house of Potiphar, he rose to the top. He was falsely accused of trying to seduce Potiphar's wife, was thrown into prison. He rose to the top. And when he's released from prison in order to interpret Paro's dreams, he rose to the top. Ben Parat Alei Ayin, a charming son to the eyes. Benot Tza'ada Alei Shur. One explanation will go with this one. The daughters, the girls climbed to the heights in order to gaze, in order to see your beauty. That's how beautiful and charming Yosef was. Now let's go to page 282, and here we have the psukim. Vayimararuhu. They embittered him. This is what's referred to as a hanging pronoun. They. we don't know who they refers to. Varobu, and they argued with him. They were antagonistic to him. Vayistamuhu, and they hated him. Ba'alei chitzim. Okay, so the English translates it as arrow-tongued men. The English puts in tongue. That's how Rashi explained it. But actually, Ba'alei chitzim literally means those who had the arrows. So, who is this referring to? Who are the ones that embittered him, caused him much bitterness, fought with him, hated him? Ba'alei chitzim. So it would seem it could and would be referring to the brothers. Though Rashi points out there are many others also. The house of Potiphar caused him great bitterness. Right? So there were others also along the way. So Vayamaru, they embittered him. That could certainly be the brothers who caused him much bitterness in his life. Varobu, they argued, they fought with him. Certainly be the brothers. However, Vayistamuhu, and they hated him. Granted, the brothers hated him, but the Torah used a different word, the more common term for hate. That's what the Torah used by the brothers. That's back in Vayeshev, when he was having his dreams. If you look back to page 200, Perek Lamed Zayin, Pasuk Dalet, the brothers saw the father had just given Yosef that special coat. The brothers saw Ki Oto Ahav Avihem, that their father loved him, Mikol Echav, more than all the brothers, Vayisneu Oto, and they hated him. So the Torah uses sin'ah as the term of hatred when it comes to the brothers. Vayistamuhu, so we might have thought that if the Torah is referring to if Yaakov, was referring to the brothers over here, it would have used that term. And it calls the brothers Ba'alei Chitzim, the ones with the arrows. Now, an arrow, the reason why Rashi went with arrow-tongued men is because an arrow is a way to harm someone from a distance. And that's what words do. Words are like arrows, right? I'm not touching the person, but from a distance, certainly in our internet world, from a great distance, one can cause tremendous harm in what they say and what they do. So it would seem a little bit strange to call the brothers Ba'alei Chitzim. They did not hurt Yosef from a distance. They grabbed him, they threw him into the pit, and either they or others then sold him, pulled him out from that pit, and sold him. But at the same time, it could be Ba'alei Chitzim means those who caused damage from afar. And the damage that they caused to Yosef, even though they might have been the ones who threw him into the pit, but at the same time, right, that damage was long-term, long distance, that Yosef suffered from that for many, many years until finally he ascended to power there in Egypt. So Vayamaru Varobu seems to indicate the brothers, which means Yaakov is referring to what the brothers did to Yosef, speaking of an awareness that Yosef didn't just disappear, get kidnapped as he went off to find the brothers, but the brothers were involved in whatever happened to him. Now, but again, we said the brothers, the term there is sina, hatred. Vayistamu is a different term. There are two places where sitma is used for hatred. Let's look back to page 140. Page 140, we have this term. Page 140 is Perek Chav Zayin, verse Mem Aleph, verse 41. This is when Yaakov, Jacob had gone in as Esav and received the brachos, and then he left, and then Esav came in and realizes that Yaakov had taken the brachot, and he is furious, he is bitter, he is in a state of incredible anguish. Mem Aleph 41. Vayistom Esav et Yaakov. Esav harbored hatred, hated Yaakov al habracha, over this bracha asher bercho aviv, that his father had blessed him. And Esav said, when my father, Yikavu Yimei Eval Avi, when the mourning of my father will come to an end, I will kill Yaakov. After Yitzchak's death, Isaac's death, I will kill Yaakov, my brother. So that's very interesting. So we can understand that Yaakov would use this term when it came to brotherly hatred. Yaakov experienced this with Esav, and that was the term that the Torah used to describe Esav's brotherly hatred. So therefore, it could very well be that when he's describing the brotherly hatred that his sons had to Joseph, he uses that term. And also, interestingly enough, if we jump ahead to 286, this is an episode at the very end of our Parsha that we're going to be focusing on a little bit later on. And that is, take a look, 286, Perek Nun, chapter 50, verse Tetvav, 15, the bottom of 286. The brothers of Yosef saw Kimet Avihem, their father had died. Vayomru, and they said, Lu Yistamenu Yosef. Perhaps Yosef will sitma. Yosef will harbor this hatred. Yosef will hate us. So we see that their fear was that which had been attributed to them, now Yosef, Hashev Yashiv Lanu, and he will now dish back, return onto us, Et Kol Ra'ah, all of the evil, Asher Gamalnu Lo, that we had given out to him. And they said to Yosef, let's just see that pasuk now, we'll come back soon. Avicha, verse 16, Tziva, Lifnei Moto, father commanded before his death, saying, say to Yosef, 286, carry the sin of your brothers. They've done so much bad to you. Carry the sins of the servants of the God of your father, right? Don't give it back to them now. Yosef hears this, and Yosef cries, and he says, do not be afraid. Am I in the place of God? Anything that you thought evil to me, God turned it around, litova, right, for good. So we do see this sitma, this hatred term, when it came to Esav's brotherly hatred to Jacob, and this could also be referring to the brothers. And the arrows would be, they had the ability. But now this next pasuk is really incredible. And I think it really teaches us a lot about how we can get over, how we can get past things in our life, hurt that we've had, wrongs that were done to us. Yaakov in his bracha continues, Vateshev be'etan kashto. But Teshev, he remained be'etan, with the strength of kashto, of his bow. V'yafozu zro'ei yadav. Right, very difficult. This is real. The brachot is real, what we call biblical poetry. Very, very deep and dense in a positive way. That there's so much meaning here. These words. Vayafozu zro'ei yadav. Zro'ei yadav is the arms, the hands. Vayafozu, Rashi learns it as paz, as gilded, meaning that when you, Yosef, had that, according to the way Rashi's learning, when you, Yosef, had that very strong arrow, because the brothers had arrows, they were in a position of strength. When they were strong and you were weak, and they were balei chitzim, they shot those arrows, they used their strength against you to send you off into where you were sent. Now you've got a very strong bow. You've got the ability to really cause damage to them. They're at your mercy. They're there in Egypt. They came to you for food. They were hungry. They were famine-stricken. You really had that, yet you stayed strong with that strong bow. And vayafozu, according to Rashi, gilded paz, you gave out gifts with your hands. You did not harbor that animosity. You did not give it back to them. But you gave them chesed. You supported them. You took care of them. Where did you get this strength from? Midei Avir Yaakov, from the hands of the Avir Yaakov, either lowercase, from the strength of Yaakov, or from, as the English has capitalized, mighty power, from the God of Yaakov. That's where you got this strength. Misham Roeh, and therefore because of this, Roeh, you will be the shepherd of Evan Yisroel, of the stone of Israel, of that nation of Israel. So because of the way you reacted when you had the ability to give back to them, to give it back to them many times over, right? What's the expression? I don't get angry, I get even, right? When you had the ability to really, really get even with them, you didn't. Now, this vayafozu can mean paz, but it could also mean like a trembling. Now, be'etan kashto, right? When the bow is drawn tightly, the arrow is, and the bow is being pulled, that is the point of the greatest tension. And all you want to do is, it's tight, it's hard. All you want to do is let go and fire that arrow. But vayafozu, you were, Yosef, you were paz, vayafozu, you were trembling, right? Meaning you were holding that and holding yourself back from shooting that arrow. Vateshev, you remain be'etan kashto, at the hardest, at the most powerful point of that bow. V'yafozu zro'ei yadav, and your hands, right? You're doing something. You're flexing your muscles for too long. What happens, right? You start to tremble. V'yafozu zro'ei yadav, your arms were trembling, not to shoot that arrow, not to give it back to them. Wow. How did you get the strength to do that, Yosef? Midei Avir Yaakov. So the way that the Netziv learns this the Hamek Davar, from the strength of Yaakov, lowercase. You saw how Yaakov was able, he made peace. Yaakov made peace. Yaakov made peace with Esav. Yaakov made peace with Lavan before he left. Yaakov, who suffered so much in his life, was constantly able and willing to make peace. Therefore, what gave you the ability, as your arms are trembling, not to let go of that arrow, not to shoot? Even though that would have released all of that tension, all of that pent-up frustration and hurt of all those years, but you didn't. You didn't allow that arrow to shoot. You learned that from the strength of Yaakov, of me. Yaakov, of course, is speaking. From the strength of Yaakov, from my ability to forgive. Or, the other way, as the English is actually translating it, from the mighty power of Yaakov, from the God of Jacob. He is the one who gave you that strength. That this is a God-given strength, or, as I want to try to understand it, a God view that gives you the strength. How was Yosef able to go ahead and truly forgive the brothers? How was he able to take all of that pain and to get past it and to live with them and to deal with them and to constantly help them and support them? How was he able to do it? And I think if we double back to the point where the brothers revealed themselves to Yosef, on page 250, where Yosef revealed himself to the brothers, back in Vayigash. And we spent a good amount of time on this last week. I don't know, whenever you travel, everything seems like so long ago. It's hard to, I think it was last week that we discussed this. Yehuda came and advocated, argued, begged, gave himself in place of Yosef. Let's look at Perek Memhei, chapter 45, Pasuk Aleph, verse 1. V'lo yachol Yosef l'hitapek. Yosef could not restrain himself. L'chol anitzavim alav, with all those who were there. Vayikra, he called out, Hotziu kol ish me'alai. Right? No one else should be here. And no one else was there when Yosef revealed himself to the brothers. Vayitein et kolo bivchi. And he let out his voice with bechi, with crying. Vayishmu mitzrayim yishma beit paro. It was a cry. It was a crying that everyone heard. And Yosef said to his brothers, Ani Yosef, I am Joseph, ha'od avichai. Is my father still alive? We discussed this at length last time. And the brothers cannot answer because they were all shook up. They were in shock before him. First of all, before we go further, Yosef cried. Yosef was a crier. Look back to page 236. The brothers come down to Egypt. Yosef accuses them of being spies. They start to talk one another. And they said, at the very top of 236, Membet, Chaf Aleph, 42, 21. One said to his brothers, we're guilty for our brother. We saw his anguish when he pleaded, and we paid no heed. That is why this is coming to us. Ruvain 22 says to them, I told you, don't sin against the lad. You didn't listen. Now his blood is being demanded from us. They did not know that Yosef was hearing. There was an interpreter between them. They didn't know that Yosef could understand. What does Yosef do? 24, Vayisov me'aleim. He turns away from them. And what does he do? And he cries. Page 244. The brothers come back. The brothers come back. And with Benjamin. And they gave him the gift. And he sees Binyamin. Verse 30. Vayimaher Yosef. And Yosef rushed. His compassion for his brother had been stirred. And he wanted to weep. Vayavo achadra, and he went into a room. Vayef kshama, and he cried over there. Number two, cry number two. Number three, he reveals himself to his brothers. And what does he do? And he lets out this anguished cry. He cries. And again, at the end of Vayechi, when he hears the brothers saying, Father had said, be easy on your brothers. The pasuk says, Vayef Yosef. Yosef cried, Bidabram elav, when they spoke to him. 4 times we have Yosef crying. We don't have Yosef, so I think number one, dealing with pain and dealing with hurt and dealing with I've been wronged, I've been cheated, etc., etc. Number one is Vayef. Have a good cry. Right? We can't keep things bottled up inside of us. Right? That stoic, stiff upper lip that a person is supposed to have, I think more than a man is supposed to have. No, that's not our way. That is not our way. We are meant to feel emotions, express emotions. The verse in speaking about the way that the nations of the world would react to a death would be that they would gouge themselves. And we're not allowed to gouge ourselves. That's not an appropriate manner of death. I believe Ramban over there says crying, sadness, yes. But anguish, agony, torment, no. We are the children of Hashem, your God. Many explanations. The child has returned to the father. Right? When we get there in Devarim, I always like to deal with, in Bamidbar actually, I always like to deal with that. Very, very powerful. Actually in Devarim. But sadness, yes. Expressing one's pain, feelings, emotions, yes. It's amazing how tears have this magical quality to them. That once you, literally, we have an expression, you cry it out. Once you cry, it has left you. That sadness is welling inside of you. And until you have your cry, it's there. And then you can literally cry it out. But it goes a lot more than that. Let's look at how Yosef viewed what happened. The Yom Yosef, back to 252. Perek Memhei Pasuk Dalet, or Pasuk Hey. Pasuk Dalet, 4. Yosef said to his brothers, draw close. They drew close. And he said, I am Joseph, your brother, that you sold me to Egypt. Off to a rocky start, right? That's not what the brothers wanted to hear. The ata, but now, al te'atzvu, do not be saddened. Va'al yichar be'einechem, do not get angry. Ki machartem oti hena, that you sold me here. Ki lemichya shelachani Elokim lifnechem. in order to be a provider of life, God has sent me before you. Those words are incredibly powerful. Meaning, if you were successful in sending me down to Egypt, it means this was part of God's plan. I'm not viewing it that you sent me down to Mitzrayim. God sent me down to Mitzrayim. Why in such a way? God only knows. But God is the one who sent me here in order to be a source of providing life and sustenance for you. Remember, we had the dreams that he had. The first dream were the 11 sheaves bowing down to his sheaf. I will be there to support you. I will be the one who will sustain your sheaves. I will be the one who will keep you alive. And he goes further. Verse 6. The famine has been going on for 2 years. Another 5 years there will not be plowing or harvesting. Vayishlacheni Elokim lifnechem. God has sent me before you, lasum lachem, to place for you sheirit ba'aretz, a survival in the land, ulachayot lachem, and to keep you alive, to sustain you, lifleita gdola. And again, verse 8, va'ata lo atem shalachtem oti heina. It is not you that sent me here. For the third time, Yosef says, in case I have not made myself clear in the way that I view this, it's not you who sent me here. Ki, rather, Ha'elokim, God. And he placed me as a father for Pharaoh, and a master over his house, and a ruler over all of Egypt. It's not you, it's not you, it's not you. Now, this is very important. So if I cause someone harm, and I'm successful in causing that person harm, that means that person was supposed to get harmed by God's will. So I'm off the hook. Actually, if I am a serial murderer, every single person that I killed was supposed to die. Not you, Siri. Every person that I killed, it gets me nervous. Siri's listening to my serial murder spiel. Yeah. So every single person that I killed was supposed to die. I am an agent of God. I'm a holy man. I'm not a serial killer. I'm a holy man carrying out the will of God. Is that what Yosef is saying? Absolutely not. What Yosef is saying is, in terms of my perspective, how I look at you, it's not you that sent me down here. God sent me down here. God runs the world through different people. Now, that does not mean that any harm that I cause someone is not my problem anymore. Obviously, God wanted that harm to come to that person. They needed to go through that difficulty, that pain, that anguish, whatever it is. Absolutely not. I've got to sort out with God, and even before with God, with that person, why I caused that pain, why I decided to be the instrument through which, the agent through which that pain would be caused. I've got to sort that out. I've got to come to terms with that. I've got to make amends for that. I mentioned before, when you have these people who go into a shul and or a school and kill people, we forgive you. I always think, who the heck are you to forgive? The family that suffered that loss, they're the ones who need to forgive. You decided to be the agent then, and even God can't forgive a person until those who were harmed by that person forgives. On Yom Kippur of all days, on the Day of Atonement of all days, God cannot forgive us for things, wrongs that we've done to others, to people, until we first gain the forgiveness of those people. But that's between, Yosef is saying, that's between you and Hashem. That's not my issue. That's not my realm. That's not my domain. I don't need to get involved in that. That's between you and God. Sort that out. But in terms of what happened to me, I recognize and I accept that this was God's orchestration. If this is where I ended up, and this is where God wanted me to be. Not only that, I recognize God sent me here to help you. The reason God sent me here was to help you survive, to help you sustain. These are the sheaves bowing down. I'm the sheave that's there to help your sheaves. So I'm willing to say this was God's will. The role that you played in it, that's between you and God to sort out. That's not for me to sort out. That's between you and God. But I'm accepting that whatever came to me came from God for a reason. And I understand the reason. The reason is that this is what allows me to keep you and your families and Father alive. This is what allows me to sustain what will be Am Yisroel, the nation of Israel, the Jewish people. That is why God sent it to me. So how are we supposed to get past the pain and the hurt and the anger that we might feel over things that happened to us, wrongs that were done to us? First of all, by crying, by being willing and able to express our emotions, and to have this insight to reframe and recognize, well, why did God want me to go through this? God is the most loving, kind, gracious being that only wants the very best for me. So why did he want me to go through this? What is it that I'm supposed to gain from this? How am I supposed to walk away as a different person, a better person, as a result of this? And to remove the individuals from the equation. They were pawns. The role that they played, that's for them to sort out. The same way that the things that I've done wrong to people, I need to sort it out with them and with God. But ultimately, what they went through, that is God's orchestration. And that is Midei Avir Yaakov, from the mighty power of Jacob, meaning back to the bracha that Yaakov gave Yosef. What allowed you to be there with your arms trembling, but not allowing yourself to have that relaxation, that release of the arrow, of getting even, of causing the brothers pain? The Avir Yaakov. Yaakov, the mighty power of Jacob. Yaakov went through so much, and he wasn't angry, and he was not bitter. And he recognized that it was all coming from God. It was that strength of Yaakov that Yosef too was able to say, Lo atem shalachani. It's not you who sent me here. It's God who sent me here. That is the strength that he was able to find by attributing it all to God, recognizing it's all God. And that's what allowed him to have that opportunity, the greatest opportunity in such a position of strength, and to not release that arrow. But to stay there, be'etan kashta, with the strength, but not release that arrow, and not give it back, not take revenge against the brothers. and that is almost the template that Yosef, if we want to look for a template, a guide for forgiveness, Yosef is the one that we must look at. With what he went through and to be able to forgive the brothers. And let's go now to the very, very end of the Parsha, the very end of Vayechi, which is the very end of Bereshit. We started this before. The brothers were afraid. The bottom of 286, verse 15, Tetvav, the brothers were afraid, or they saw that there was now, with the father's death, Yosef might hate us and give it back to us. They sent messengers to Yosef saying, Father commanded us before his death, saying, this is what you should say to Yosef. Ana, 288, Sana pesha achecha. Forgive, carry the sins of your brothers. They caused you bad. Carry those sins. And Yosef cried when they spoke to him. Then when this message came to him, then the brothers came and they fell before him and said, we'll beat you as slaves. And he said to them, do not be afraid. Am I in the place of God? Again, the same idea. Am I in the place of God? Atem chashavtem alai ra'ah. You thought evil to me. Elokim chashava l'tova. But God turned it around to tova, to good. Laman aso kayom hazeh. In order that I can do exactly what I'm doing on this day. Lachayot am rav. That to keep this great nation alive. V'ata now al tira'u. Do not be afraid. Anochi achalkel etchem. I will support you. V'etavchem and your families. Vayinachem otam, and he comforted them. Vayidaber al libam. He spoke to their hearts. Now, Rashi says, Father never said this, but they were afraid. Rashi says, Shinu badavar mipnei hashalom. They changed matters out of peace, because Yaakov did not command this. He did not suspect that Joseph would be harsh on the brothers. But the Hamekdava, the Netziv says, no. They understood that bracha. They understood the bracha where Yaakov said to Yosef, they caused you harm, but you stayed strong and didn't release it back. And that's how you got the strength from the God of Jacob, and that's how you became the leader. The Netziv says they understood that that was what Yaakov was referring to. So Yaakov, in effect, is giving this mission to Yosef. Stay strong. Do not release that arrow. Do not cause any pain to your brothers. So according to this, the way Rashi says, right, Yaakov never said this. So we don't know. Did he know or not? But it seems from the brachot that he clearly had a good sense that the brothers were involved. Did he have all of the gory details? We don't have all the gory details. We discussed a few weeks ago the Rashbam. Was it Yosef? Was it the brothers who sold Yosef? Was it the others who sold Yosef? But if it was others, it was the Madanim or the Ishmaelim, right? So then you have to say, when Yosef said, I'm Yosef, your brother that you sold to Mitzrayim, not that they literally sold, right? Exactly the details of what Yaakov knew, that I don't think there's any clear proof. But a sense that Yaakov knew the brothers were involved in this, and the clear hatred they had even before he was sold, that somehow led to Yosef being down in Mitzrayim, enslaved and elevated, and all that went on. Yaakov had a sense and probably did not want to know the details. You know, sometimes as a parent, with little kids, they teach you a real lesson. I remember if some other kids would be unkind to one of my children, I get very upset, right? I'm the protective father. And then you see 20 minutes later, they're playing together like nothing happened. They're walking arm in arm. And you're like, come on, why aren't you angry at him? Why aren't you learning the wonderful midah of taking revenge and harboring animosity and not forgiving, right? If they're getting along, okay, I'm not going to, I can step out. And I imagine, again, according to that Orach Chaim, that Yosef did not want to reveal his identity, lest father would find out. Once he had come to terms with the brothers, he was able to reveal his identity. And even if father would find out, his father would not necessarily want to know all of the details. You guys are good, I'm good. I don't need to stir it up further and say, no, 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 no. What really happened? Why'd you, right? Right? Understanding as Yosef understood, Hashem had sent Yosef down to Mitzrayim. The role the brothers had played, that's between them and Hashem. If they've worked it out with Yosef, now it's between them and Hashem. And Yosef's last words, as his father had asked him, take me out to be buried in Israel, Yosef too wanted to be buried in Israel. Yaakov was able to command Yosef and make him swear to do it. Yosef was powerful and he could do it. But Yosef knew that upon his death, his brothers would not have the power to have this leader of Egypt taken out of Egypt to be buried elsewhere. But he said to them, Vayome Yosef el Achav, see the last few psukim over here, verse 24. Yosef said to his brothers, I'm going to die. God will remember you and bring you up from this land to the land that he swore to Abraham, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Vayashpa Yosef, and he made them swear, saying, God will remember you, bring up my bones, mizeh, from here. And Yosef died at the age of 110 years. Vayichantu oto, they embalmed him. Vayisem ba'aron, he was placed into an aron, into a coffin, b'Mitzrayim, in Egypt. And as we complete an entire sefer of the Torah, we finish Bereshit, we say, Chazak, Chazak, v'nit chazek. Be strong, and may we be strengthened. Next week, we will begin Shemot, the book of names, the book of Exodus. Okay, Yashkoach, everybody. Good seeing everybody.
Toda Rabba.
Bavakasha. Miri, good having you join us. Next time, come on a computer so we can see you. It's nicer. We can see people also.
I don't look good in the morning.
Neither do I. It never stopped me.
You always look good.
I don't look good in the morning, afternoon, or evening. It's all the same. Okay, everybody. Thursday, we have lunch and learn about kosher pork, right? And they call that, what do they call that? Not the unbelievable burger, the impossible burger, I think. That's the company that makes the non-meat meat. And now they're coming out with impossible pork. And getting a hechsher, getting certification for that, opens the door, and their inability at this point, at least, opens the door to some very different, very interesting views on how we're supposed to look at the things that we can't do. So that'll be to lunch and learn on Thursday at 1 p.m., of course, with Mincha 12:35.
Toda Rabba, Yom Tov.
Yom Tov to everybody. Have a very good day, everybody.